in the UK because I was there for 5 weeks after I had finished my coast-to-coast walk. And so I was still over there when she said, "Would you come back? Would you be interested?" And I said, "Absolutely, I would be delighted." So it's nice to be here. It's nice to already meet some folks that know my mom, and this lovely lady here who used to work for Dr. Lomax, who delivered me years ago. So, and I believe I see some other familiar faces sitting around the room. There's one in the back. That's my husband. He's the only man I kissed when he came in today. So thank you, Donna, and I'll just go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is, as I said, I was in the UK for 5 weeks, but I'm going to talk to you about my adventure over there, which was my coast-to-coast walk. So I saw this not long ago, and there's a lot of ladies in this room that I think can appreciate this. And in particular, I guarantee you my husband can appreciate the last line, "What on earth is she up to now?" So let's flash back to December of 2019. Well, about that time, I saw this picture. Now, there's a lot of things in this picture that scare me. I'm not going to name anything in particular, but beyond the picture over my head was how I looked. I looked at that picture and I went, "I cannot believe that." And this is totally politically incorrect. I had more chins than the Chinese phone book. I mean, I was just embarrassed. And what I realized at the time was that I was drinking too much, I was taking too many medications, I wasn't in good health, and I was overweight. So I decided I needed to do something. So I decided to quit drinking and start walking. Now, in hindsight, January 1st of 2020 might not have been the best year to quit drinking, but I did. And so I started walking. Now, I've always been a walker. And as my husband would say, you have the Harry Truman walk. And when he said you walk like Harry Truman, I'm like, how does Harry Truman walk? Well, apparently Harry Truman walked very briskly and with purpose at about 120 steps per minute, I believe it is. He learned it in the military. So I take after Harry Truman. I'm happy. And I believe in this. If I could not walk far and fast, I think I'd explode, because that's the way I like to walk. Now, in my walking history in the past, I've done several 3-day breast cancer fundraising walks. I did one in 2000, one in 2005, and I thought, well, that's what I'll train for in 2020. Well, of course, with COVID, that got canceled. So I just kept walking. I thought, well, I'll do it in 2021. Well, I'll be darned if it didn't get canceled in 2021. So I knew I needed something to do. I needed a challenge. So I got this book, and it's got probably 50 or more walks all across the world that are long-distance walks, and I came across this one that said Coast to Coast Trail. Well, it's in England. There's an advantage. They're an English-speaking country, and it says down here it transects northern England, and I thought, well, that doesn't, and look, it doesn't look bad. I mean, that looks really nice. So I decided to do some more research. Well, this gentleman, Alfred Wainwright, designed the Coast to Coast walk. Now, Mr. Wainwright was probably, now we would say, he was a finance director for a municipality. And he moved to the Lake District of the United Kingdom and just fell in love with the fells. That's mountain talk in English, right, Jay? And so he did a series of books, and this is actually his drawing there. That's his self-portrait. But he did a series of books of the fells in the Lake District of England. And he diagrammed all of these things. There's 214 that he did, and they call them Wainwrights. And for hikers now, they call it bagging a Wainwright. So if you go to the top of one of these fells, then you've bagged a Wainwright. And when you bag all 214, you get a little certificate or something like that. I only bagged one Wainwright while I was there. But Mr. Wainwright designed a coast-to-coast walk. Now he wanted it to go all the way across England. He wanted to avoid cities and towns primarily. And he wanted it to include the variety of landscapes in that part of England. And he called it a coast-to-coast walk, if you'll notice. He didn't say the coast-to-coast. Because what he did when he published his book and his maps was that he said, you can follow this route, but there's a lot of other routes, ways that you can go. You can make this walk your own. So I would be, Jeopardy, geography is my worst category. So I'm just saying, here we go. So here's where we start. We go through the Lake District, the Yorkshire Dales, which I should have been able to move that down, and the North York Moors. And if you look here, this is where it started, and then that's where we finished. This is a better map, though, because Mr. Wainwright didn't do a straight across, or as the crow flies. We went around and around and up and down. And one of the reasons he did this was he wanted to, as I said before, take us through those three different distinct areas. I just want to tell you, so the Lake District was created by glaciers, or as I learned to say, glaciers, and meltwater. It includes U-shaped valleys and steep and sharp ridges. You'll find England's highest mountain and its deepest and longest lakes. And then, when we move back to the Yorkshire Dales, that's limestone country with lush green valleys crested with white limestone cliffs. You've got a lot of walls there that were built by sheep farmers, and if any of you watch British TV, you will recognize the Yorkshire Dales from All Creatures Great and Small, Emmerdale, and the movie The Callan Girls. And then the North York Moors is an upland area in North Yorkshire, and it has the largest expanse of heather moorland in the UK, with three types of landscape: green areas of pasture land, purple and brown moorland, and woodland. So, lest you think, oh, and by the way, it is 192 miles, plus or minus. Lest you think it's flat, this is not. It is not. That is the elevation there of our walk. So as you can see, Mr. Wainwright had us going up and down mountains. Now, I read this as a description in one of the tour guides, and it says, don't worry, it's not climbing Mount Everest, you need to be in reasonably good shape, but, don't worry. That was not true, because the first 3 days were absolutely the most brutal I have ever experienced. I thought I was in good shape, and had I known how to read a map like this, a topographical map, I think I would have been able to tell that I was going to be going up and down mountains. But I didn't see this kind of map before I signed up. So what would make me think that I could do this walk, other than just being a walker? Well, I don't know if any of you folks in here recognize this lady, but her name is Grandma Gatewood. And Grandma Gatewood, when she was 67 years old in that picture, in 1955, walked the Appalachian Trail. Grandma Gatewood had 11 children. She was a survivor of domestic violence. She was a farmer's wife. She walked the Appalachian Trail, the entire thing, in canvas sneakers. She carried a shower curtain to keep dry. She found places to sleep with folks along the way, or camped in the woods, or on picnic tables. And she carried that canvas bag for her gear, what little gear she had. Now, this was my backpack. I couldn't have done it carried with Grandma Gatewood, but I figured this. I was about to turn 65, and if she could do it like that, I could do the coast to coast, for heaven's sakes. So I started. I was a walker, I was not a hiker. My camping days are long over. I was a Girl Scout for many years. I'm not doing that again. My idea of roughing it now is no room service. So I did not want to have to camp. I had never carried a backpack before I started training for this walk, not ever, not in school. So I decided that I would add some backpacking in about January of this year. And so I found some trails in the Uwharrie Forest and down at Moore Mountain that were really nice, and so I enjoyed doing that. It was an adventure. When I walk around town and do my walks, I usually have my AirPods in, so I'm listening to podcasts, usually murder mysteries and that sort of thing, or audible books. But when you're out in the woods, you can't do that. I was a little bit nervous about being alone with my thoughts for hours and hours, but I actually came to enjoy some of the solitude. Now, I didn't enjoy this because I'm not really an outdoor person. So when you hear rustling in the woods, you know, I'm not leaning toward chipmunk. I'm leaning toward bloodthirsty wolf. So one day I'm in the Uaris, great trail. I love the trail. It's about the second time I've done it. And I'm walking, and I have a tendency when I walk to look down because you know when we get to be a certain age, we got to watch where we're putting our feet because you don't want to fall, you don't want to twist an ankle. So I'm watching where I'm walking, and all of a sudden I stop, and I look ahead of me, probably about 8 feet, and I'm going, wonder what that is. That's what that was. Now, I did what any self-respecting woman would do. I took a picture of it and texted it to a friend and said, what kind of snake is it and how do I get him to move? He immediately texted me back and said, that is a timber rattlesnake and you do not get him to move. He will move when he wants to. Well, I had thrown a couple of sticks at him, which I was later told that that's not the thing to do. He didn't move, and I clapped, and I hollered, scoot, scoot, go on, come on. Well, he didn't listen to that either. And so, finally, he did slither off on his own. Now, what I have learned, and I'll tell y'all, so if you're out in the woods and you see a timber rattlesnake, don't throw sticks at it, don't yell at it, you just stomp on the ground, because apparently they sense the vibrations. Right. Like we're going to get that close to do that. So anyway, here's my friend there as he slithered off. But I had a decision to make because as you can see, he was all the way across the trail. And by golly, I was going to do 12 miles that day, and I was 5 miles in. And he was not, if I turned around, I'd only get 10. And he was not going to get me out of doing my last 2 miles. But here's the problem. What do every single one of those look like? A snake. So the whole rest of the walk, I'm going like that. But I finally made it through my 12 miles. Now, here's a trail that I really liked, and this is in the Uwharrie Forest, and they call this a loop, the Dutchman's Loop. And as you can see, it is a loop. It kind of goes around, and they said it was about 12 miles, and it was strenuous. And I thought, okay, well, I'm in pretty good shape. I can do it. It's Uwharrie's. How strenuous can it be? It's not the Alps. Yeah, that's how strenuous it was. There were rock faces that I was climbing up. I thought to myself, I'm going to be on Dateline. I know I am, because they're going to do an episode and they go, did she fall or was she pushed? Next on Dateline. Because I was convinced I was going to fall. But I made it through that brutal hike. I get to the end, and that sign is a lie. It's not 11.2. It was over 12 miles. And I'm so happy. And I look and I go, NC 2427 trailhead, 11.2 miles. That was where I parked my car. And it was about 6 o'clock. And I didn't have a flashlight, and I was not going back the same way I came. So I'm standing there and I'm looking at that sign and I'm about to cry. And I'm going, I am not calling my husband. I am just not going to call him and tell him that I've gotten lost and that he needs to come pick me up and rescue me. So I don't know what I'm going to do. Then I remembered this sign, and it said that there was a campground nearby. So I thought, I have money in my backpack. I will walk to the campground and I will pay somebody to drive me to my car. Yeah, I didn't care. Stranger danger. I didn't care. So I walked to the campground. Thank goodness it was Easter weekend. And the first campsite I went to, they were all so drunk that it was like, oh, never mind. I believe I'm fine. But I did find a gentleman who took me to my car, and I didn't tell my husband till much later that night that a perfect stranger drove me to my car. But that was potentially another Dateline episode. All that to say, I am very directionally challenged. I can get lost very, very easily. And it's not because I can't follow directions, it's just I just don't pay attention. It's like I just really don't care. So when I decided to do the coast to coast, I knew that one of the things was I needed a guided tour because it's not, The Appalachian Trail is pretty well trail marked. The coast to coast is not. There are markers, but you really do need to go by the maps and the guidebook. So I was not going to do that. I needed a guide. It was a group tour, so there were 11 of us plus our guide. It was June 5th through 17th, and the significance of that date was that June 17th was one day before my 65th birthday. So I intended to walk and finish and celebrate my 65th birthday. Now I did step out of my comfort zone because when I signed up I was too late to get a private room, so I did have to share with an unknown lady the entire time. And this is what you call slack packing. So there was a van that took our luggage every night from place to place. So we stayed in bed and breakfast in little hotels, but the van would take our luggage from each place. And the only thing that we had to carry was the gear that we would need, our lunches, water, and that sort of thing. And we walked from west to east. And Wainwright designed it west to east. Some folks do it east to west, but west to east because, quite frankly, the first 3 days are awful. And if you're doing those at the end of having already walked over 100 miles, it would be brutal. Plus, the wind is at your back when you're walking west to east. So we started our journey on June 5th at St. Bees Head, which is on the west coast of England. And if you're standing at St. Bees Head, you can look across the Irish Sea and see the Isle of Man. So you walk up the coastline, and this is the start, so you got a nice little sign, and there's our group. And a tradition with the coast to coast is that you step into the Irish Sea, you get your boots wet in the Irish Sea, and you grab a pebble from the Irish Sea that you carry all the way across, and then you toss it into the North Sea. So here we are. So you start out and we walk around the coast, and then you walk around that way, and then you cut back into the right, into the more flat land. Now that's our first sighting of sheep and cows, which we became very adept at walking and dodging sheep patties and cow patties, because England has something called the right to roam. And so, as Jill well knows, this is codified now. So with the exception of like people's personal backyards and areas that are especially designated, you can traverse property in England unlike what we can do here. So you'll see some pictures down the road where we're literally walking through fields of barley and wheat, and so and it's perfectly fine. So I put these pictures in there, and I'm not going to elaborate on each individual picture. A lot of y'all have probably already been to England, but I just wanted you to see kind of the different terrains that we walk. Now this is the first day, and this is before lunch, and so everything is new and everything's exciting, and so see we even walk into the woods, beside roads, but it was just so beautiful. Now, after lunch was awful, because after lunch was straight uphill, and I thought I was going to die. Y'all, I'm a real fast walker, and I was at the back of the pack, and I was mortified because I thought, I should be able to keep up with these people, but I could not breathe. And I'm slogging up there, and that backpack was getting heavier by the minute, and my shoulders were hurting, but finally, at the end of the day, we made it. And this is an example of some of the bed and breakfasts that we stayed in. These are actual pictures. Maybe I didn't take them, but they're actual pictures of the bed and breakfasts where we stayed in. And so they were lovely little places all throughout the countryside. And the joke is the one on the top right over there, that's our very last bed and breakfast. So we were coming into the home stretch, and you go down to the North Sea, and you're so excited, and then the bed and breakfast is a mile back up the thing. So after 192 miles, they make you walk another mile back uphill. Now here's the thing about those daggone bed and breakfasts. And Jill, you could have told me about this before I left. Those showers, every single one of them was different. And every single one of them, I had a hard time figuring out. And my roommate one night, I had taken my shower first, and she popped out, she had a towel around her, and she said, "Did you have hot water?" And I went, "No, I thought it was just me." But everyone was different. Sometimes there'd be a switch outside the door, and so we're trying to figure that out. It was crazy. But when it was hot, it was hot. And the other thing that was crazy, I learned this my first night. I plugged in my phone. I thought, this is great. It's going to charge. Oh, no. It's not like here where you plug in your phone and the juice is always there. You got to turn it on. This is a little switch, and you got to turn that outlet on. So I went back over to my phone. It's like, why is my phone charging? And then my roommate said, did you turn it on? No, I didn't. So this is day 2. And here we are. This is Interdale water. If y'all ever watch Emmerdale, that is based around Interdale water. So as you can see, we're starting at the bottom of the hill. And now we're walking up. Now this was the second day, and this was rocky climbing. And I wasn't used to really rocky. When I did my hikes, it was more like what we have. You know, it's just a path, and it's steep, and you've got roots and that sort of thing. But I was not used to the rocks. And because I was so concerned about twisting my ankle or taking that little misstep, I was being very, very careful. Also, the first couple of days, I didn't want to get my boots wet. And so when there would be water, I would do whatever I could to step over it. By about the third day, I was just plowing right through that water. They can get wet or not. And this is part of our crew there. So now here we are close to the top. That water on the far left, that's where we started. So we climbed up, and again, it was up and down every single day. But then this is some of the sights that we were rewarded with. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, it's not the Alps, and it's not spectacular, but there's just something about it. And when you think about how they were created by the glaciers or glaciers moving through, it's just amazing. So now we have quiz, pop quiz. I know there's teachers in the room. How many pounds is 20 kilograms?
44.
Okay, it's 44 pounds. So why is this significant?
That's your backpack.
No, not the backpack. Oh, thank goodness, not the backpack. We were allowed one piece of luggage, and it could weigh no more than 44 pounds. Now, y'all, I don't know about you guys, but I hear this a lot when we go someplace. This one back there will go, we're just going for the weekend. How much do you really need? Really? Yeah, that much. That much. And so I was going to be in England for 5 weeks. I needed my stuff. Now I had one bag that I checked through from the beginning to the end. You could pay extra, and they could, so stuff you didn't think you'd need, they could check that. But still, I had this duffel bag. And so I crammed everything in there. I had my little scale. I thought ahead, and I took my little scale so I could weigh it. This is what it was like. I am not kidding you. On a daily basis, that's what I was doing. It's like shoving that stuff back in there. And I almost at every bed and breakfast, I left something for the proprietors and said, I don't need this anymore. I can't carry this anymore. You keep it. I did realize that I took way more than I would need, because when you're hiking and walking with a bunch of people that you know, they really don't care if you smell. And so had I known that, I wouldn't have taken clean clothes for every day. And again, why is this important? Why is 44 pounds important? What do you notice about these bed and breakfasts? Yes, they're all multi-floored. I had 13 nights there. There was one night when we were on the ground floor and one night where we had an elevator. Every other time, I was dragging that daggone double bag up and down stairs. It builds character, or so I was told. So here we are. This is one day. I think this is my favorite picture that I took on the whole trip, because I just love the little halo around the sun. And there's just something about that picture that makes me feel good. And here we are, we're getting ready to ascend up the mountains again, up the fells again, and here we are looking back down on where we came. And that is not the same view. Now, this is really tricky because I have to go back in my cameras, and thank goodness with our iPhones, it will tell us the date that we took a picture, because otherwise I'd be going, that is the same picture. But I stopped a lot, and on the first day, it's kind of like having children. You know, the first couple of days you stop and take a lot of pictures, And then when you have a second child, there's fewer. And then by the third, you can't even find them in the family album. If they weren't around, you wouldn't know that you had a third child. And that's kind of the way that it was on the trip. And quite honestly, the first few days, I stopped often to take pictures, and it was really so I could just catch my breath. It's like, okay. But just to prove that I was up there and wearing almost the very same outfit as I am now, I made it. Now, we descended that day. At the end of that day, we went into Grassmere. And for those of you all who are familiar, Grassmere is in the Lake District, and it is the home of William Wordsworth. And his grave is there. He and his wife and his daughter are buried there. And this was the picture of the Queen. Was in a lovely little chapel right there at the cemetery, the Wordsworth Cemetery. And of course, this was just a few days after the Platinum Jubilee, so that's why they had the picture up like that. Now we have another quiz. Teachers, how many calories would a 7-hour hike burn? A lot is a good answer. You can say that. But I figured for somebody my size, it's about, between 2,400 and 3,000. That's pretty decent. It's a good daggone thing because this is how we ate, y'all. I mean, and we ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This is what they call a full English breakfast. There is sausage and bacon and eggs and tomatoes and mushrooms and potatoes and beans and black sausage. Who likes black sausage? I do. I love black sausage. Nobody else in my group liked it. This is the small English breakfast. And you still have everything. So I ended up after, because what our bed and breakfast would do is they would pack us a box of lunch that we could carry. So instead of getting sandwiches, because they were huge sandwiches and stuff that they would pack for us, I would order the English breakfast with bacon, which their bacon is more like country ham. And then I'd get some aluminum foil, just wrap up my country ham, and I'd take that and I'd have that for lunch, and it was perfect. Of course, there's the ubiquitous fish and chips, and I'm not a fish eater, but everybody else ate them. Then there's one of my favorites, steak and ale pie. In the top corner, bangers and mash. And then I didn't have sticky toffee pudding, but I was told that I should. But those were not my favorite. This was my favorite. Kendall mint cakes. That's like if you took the chocolate off a York peppermint patty and just ate the inside. It is nothing but sugar and mint, and it is wonderful. Then those pinballs, again, sugar, and I think maybe it was because we were burning calories from craving sugar, but also mushy peas. I love me some mushy peas. And then this, here in the corner, is called, I'll tell you the story. So the first day, we get a list, and it says, what do you want in your lunch? And it's a sandwich, what kind, blah, 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 blah. And then it said flapjack. Well, that's really interesting. How do you put a pancake in lunch? I'm not really sure how that works, but I'll go ahead and check it and see what a flapjack, how I can eat a pancake for lunch. Well, this is a flapjack, and it's kind of like a nutrition bar, really, but it's got oats, and it can have, I fell in love with these. So I ate one with peanut butter and chocolate chips and dates and cherries. It's a wonder I didn't gain weight while I was walking. So after we left Grassmere, this here is called the Brothers' Parting Stone. And in 1800, Wordsworth and his brother John walked from Grassmere to this point where his brother John left him to go to the coast. He was going to be a captain for an East Indian Company ship. But in 1805, John Wordsworth's ship sank and he drowned. So the brothers never met again. And later on in life, the Wordsworth Society erected this stone, but apparently Wordsworth was just devastated by his brother's loss, that they were very, very close. And so he composed, what was the name? Let me see if I can get the name of it. Y'all probably know. Well, I don't have it. I'm sorry. It's the Elegy for My Brother or something like that. And Samuel Coleridge Taylor and Wordsworth were very good friends, and Taylor estimated that Wordsworth walked 180,000 miles in his adult lifetime because he was definitely what they call a fell wanderer. And Coleridge, for those of y'all who don't remember, he wrote the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is water, water everywhere, nowhere to drop to drink. Just when next time that comes up on Jeopardy, you'll know. Now let's talk a little bit about the fauna on the trip. There were lots of cows, and we walked through their pastures. And what was interesting to me is a lot of the women, particularly several from the UK, were petrified of cows. They were just, and maybe they had reason to be, but I'm like, it's a cow, it's a cow. and what our guide said, it's, you really don't have to worry about the adults too much. It's the juveniles that sometimes the juveniles will get a little curious and like, I ain't getting close enough to figure out who's a juvenile. I mean, what's the dividing line? So, but there were all different kinds of cows and all different kinds of sheep. I mean, the black-faced sheep, then the white sheep, and they were everywhere. And sheep do nothing but eat and poop. I think that's pretty much all they do because they sure do make a lot of waste. If we could figure out a way to use that for fuel, oh my gosh, it would be wonderful. So as we're coming into this town, Glen Reading, this was where we stayed one night, and I had this sign there that says, slow down, red squirrels. And so I asked our guide, I said, is that just a joke? Because that's what I thought. No, it's a real thing. Red squirrels are like endangered over there, and they don't really care for us Americans for the reason that our gray squirrels have somehow been introduced over there and have kind of taken over the population. So the red squirrels are a protected species. So I didn't get to see one on my visit. I kept looking. I did see, they have a lot of slugs over there though. And they had some really pretty ones. Big slugs. I digress. But now this, I don't think I can play this for you, but we were walking along one day, and I hear this sound. I'm like, well, that really sounds like a cuckoo. And it was cuckoo, cuckoo. Oh, is that a dove or what? So I asked the guy, and he said, no, it's a cuckoo. That's their habitat. That's what the cuckoo looks like, and it was in their habitat. That's the most amazing thing. I never thought in my whole life I'd actually hear a real live cuckoo. So here we are, moving along the countryside. Again, this is not the same picture, but it does look very familiar. But we're moving from the Yorkshire Dale, from the Yorkshire Dales into wherever we are. I don't even remember. The Lake District from the Yorkshire Dales. Right here, I am standing atop the highest peak on the coast to coast. It is not the highest peak in England, that is Scafell Pike, but this is Kidsty Pike. And as you can tell, I am very happy, and it was very, very cold. Before we left, my husband, because I had gloves out, I had scarves, I had all kinds of stuff, he's like, you're going in June, really? It was freezing up there. But I managed to pack good clothing, so. This is our whole group. You can see how excited we were because it was so cold and windy. We took that picture, and I'll be darned if we didn't bolt after that. Now, Mr. Wainwright said there's no such thing as bad weather, only unsuitable clothing. And I was determined, I had read that before I left, and I was determined that I was going to have suitable clothing. So I had 2 pairs of waterproof pants, and I had 2 waterproof jackets, hence why my luggage was at the 44-pound limit. But I can say that we really did not experience the true coast-to-coast walk because the only rain we had was one day for about 20 minutes. And it was not heavy at all, it was just a little sprinkling. So we managed to get through 13 days of walking with really the worst weather we had was just the windy. So here we are walking back down. Isn't that just beautiful? And as we ended that day, we came to Shap Abbey. The Shap Abbey significance is that it was the last abbey closed by Henry VIII. And if you will recall, and if you've been watching the Boleyns on PBS, Henry VIII had his break with the Catholic Church over their unwillingness to grant him a divorce or annulment from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, so he could marry Anne Boleyn. And so that he parted ways with the Catholic Church, with the Church of England. And so that's the significance of this. This is basically all that is left now. It's a historical site, but other than the parts of the tower and a few parts there in the back, that's really all that's left. But it was still beautiful. You know, and it's funny, one of the things as I traveled on the coast to coast, and then especially when I was in other parts of the UK, you see the architecture. And I think to myself, you know, we think we're so smart now, and we've got computers, and we can design this and that and the other. And when I see what folks were able to design and create and build, it's just amazing to me. So now after Shap, we got to Karen's Walking. That's me. I'm at the front of the pack. They took the picture of my back because that's the kind of walking I like to do. I became leader, not that it was a race or anything like that. But what we see now too in the Yorkshire Dales is we see a lot more of these stone fences. Now, speaking of stone fences, so as we're walking, I noticed with these stone fences, you see this line right here, and then there's another line right there. So I asked our guide, I said, what's the significance of that ledge right there? And his story was, and he seemed to be pretty knowledgeable, his story was that the stonemasons who laid those back in the day would lay those stones out somewhat, and it was almost like their calling card. So the more level and even those stones were, when people would take a look at that, they would go, that is a really good job. They did a good job, because of course there wasn't any advertising then. So that's how, now I have read since that they also were used to keep sheep from jumping, so I'm not really sure which one it was, but it was interesting to me because our guide was also talking, as you can see, they're built in a pyramid, kind of, and there's just miles and miles and miles and miles of these fences. So here we are, walking. I have to tell y'all, so we walked for 13 days, 192 miles. I never once got up in the morning and thought, just cannot put those boots back on again. I just cannot wear that backpack again. But every morning it was like, okay, let's get up and let's get it done. And in the evenings, while I would be ready for the day to end and ready to be able to sit and relax, I never had a day where I was, please just let this end. It wasn't like that at all. And now as we're going through here, we're coming across some of the mining country. So you see these various structures out across. I thought that was one that was interesting with the tree now growing from the top. But you can see on this day in particular, you see again how hard the wind was blowing with the way that the plants are. This is called 9 Standards Rig. It's a series of 9 cairns or rock structures. And they've been around forever, back to the 1200s. And there's various stories about what they are, who built them, why they were built. The one that I liked the best was that they were built to fake out, basically, the Romans, to think, so that then when they would look across on this fell, that they would see these and they would think that those were soldiers, and so it would fake them out. That's the story I like best, but apparently there's just a lot of different urban legends about why they were there. Now here's another thing. When you're walking through the countryside and you're walking through sheep fields and cow pastures, the sheep and the cows, the people own them don't want them to get out. And so they build stiles and gates. So these are some of the ones that we had to go through and across. The one in the top right over there, that's an example of what they call a kissing gate. It's a gate where you go in, it shuts, and then you open it again and go out and it shuts it. So it's a little, but it's the sheep, you can go through, but the sheep can't go through. They were fun to navigate with a full backpack. And here we are finally halfway. More pictures. Now here we're coming, really this is a slate mining area and lead mining area, and so you come across these, and this at one time, obviously the mining industry in the UK was very, very profitable, and spread out over a big swath of territory, and it would involve all generations of the family. The father would work in the mine, the mother would have a role, the children would have a role. There were very short lifespans because the sky was black from all the smoke. And this is our group walking through that area. I like to think of this as our Sound of Music. This is kind of, we're escaping Austria for friendly Switzerland. And this was just a screen grab from a video, but and before I left, I knew we were going to be a group, but I didn't really anticipate that we would be a group so much. I thought we would be apart more often, and so I wasn't really sure how that would work out, but I really, really enjoyed it. Here we are walking through, that is barley. You know how you can tell barley? Barley is for beer and has a beard. So, and wheat does not. So we walk through wheat and walk through barley. So that's how you can tell the difference if you ever find yourself walking through a field and you're not sure whether it's barley or wheat. And again, signs. Now this is in a place called Bolton-on-Swale. It's a quaint little church cemetery. Henry Jenkins is buried there. Henry Jenkins was allegedly 169 years old when he died. So it looks like we got a lot of time left, don't we? Better make the most of it. Now, obviously, there's no way to verify that, and but they claim him as England's oldest man. Richmond was the only really big city along the way, and it was, I think Richmond is probably about Salisbury's size, but everything else along the route, I mean, literally sometimes the bed and breakfast would be the only thing in town. There wasn't a convenience store. We were in the country, and it was lovely. We managed to survive. Now, along the way, a lot of landowners would do some creative things. These folks had it rigged, and there's a spider in the skull and a rat, but they also had a hidden microphone in there. So, like when you got them on the stile, it would go like that. So, yeah, it was humorous. And then, obviously, along the way, the coast to coast is a very big deal. So you have folks here, as they're saying, St. Bees Head, where we started, was that way, and Robin Hood's Bay, where we end, is that way, and then the C2C sign, so that folks like me, who are directionally challenged, would know which way to go. Now, this was a sign at one of the bed and breakfasts, one of the nicer ones we stayed at. And based on this sign, there's over 400,000 steps along the coast-to-coast walk. And I felt every one of them. And now you can tell we're going into the North Fork Moors. The landscape is really different. You can see it's a lot flatter there. It's a lot flatter in the distance. But Mr. Wainwright still had us going. If there was a hill, he had us going up and down the hill. And along the way, there are various trig markers. I have no clue what that is, so I would explain it to you, but it would be a lie. I think it has something to do with landmarking. Y'all are smarter than me. But see how flat that is? And more, I don't know, it's more, I guess, what I think of sometimes when I'm flying over the United States and I see the countryside. Again, here's some more trig markers, and the hill, of course, that was one of the hills we had to climb. And I took a picture of that because I did not deface that rock with Karen Jones. That was not me. That was the way it was when I found it. And here we go. Now we're in the moors, and this here, all this, that's heather. And when it is in bloom, it is a beautiful. I am told, I didn't get to see it, but I am told it is a beautiful, beautiful purple color. Is that right, Jill? That's what I'm told. And in that area, this is what they do. They hunt grouse. And you will see, we saw as we were walking along the line, now these are stock photos. I did not take these, but you will see along the way. And I kept seeing these things, and especially I saw several of those wooden things. I thought, what is that for? Well, those are blinds. So it is a big industry now, and the gentlemen pay a lot of money to be taken. They have their champagne breakfast in the limousine, and it takes them up there. And then they have boys or men who are called beaters, who go and beat the heather so the grouse fly up, which just doesn't seem fair to the grouse, in my opinion. But there's a limit. They pay a lot of money, and they can only take 2 grouse for what they pay, and it's thousands of dollars. If they want more grouse, then they have to buy it from the landowner. And on August the 12th, they call the Glorious 12th. That is when grouse season starts. And apparently there is a big bragging rights competition to see who can be what restaurant in London can be the first to get grouse on the Glorious 12th, fresh grouse to serve. So, but that was really interesting. I did see some grouse and some grouse babies, but we were there obviously several months before that. And this we're coming in this is called the Lion Inn, and you see it off in the distance. This is one of those where we're walking toward it, and it's way in the distance, and it's way in the distance, and way in the distance, and finally it's there, and you're just so glad that it's there. Because, I didn't tell you about that, but you can see this road here. We cut over on that over there, and we linked up with an old, it used to be a railroad track, and there's no railroad now. But it was the most boring part of the coast to coast because it was just a track. And it was great for me. That's exactly how I walk, and I loved it, so I'm booking it. But it was pretty boring. Now I want to tell you just a little bit about the people before we kind of wind it up. These are 2 ladies who were walking for mental health and raising money for during the walk for mental health. The lady with the dark hair, her husband committed suicide. And so mental health was really important to her. And this is our group. And I like to say, I didn't say that we were like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz because we had all the different characters. The problem was that when it got to me, the only one left was the bad witch. And so I didn't really like that analogy that much. So I'm trying to come up with a different one. I'm not really sure what it would be, but we had folks from all over. So this lady, this lady, and this lady, they were all from the UK. These 2 ladies were from Canada. That fellow up there is from Australia. And this man and that lady were from Asheville. So the very first night we had a group meeting, and we're sitting there, and the gentleman on the far right at the bottom was in the room first, and then I got there, and I saw he had on a Carolina Bobcat. And I said, "Oh, did you go to Carolina?" And he says, "No, my daughter did." And he says, "But I live in North Carolina." And I said, "Where?" He said, "Asheville." And I went, "Oh my gosh." So there were 4 of us on this coast to coast that were from North Carolina. The other funny thing about this group is the gentleman from Australia in the top right corner is named Mike Jones. And for those of you who know, my husband is named Mike Jones. So I got to have a Mike Jones hike husband. Now this is our intrepid guide, Dave. Dave does this, 3 or 4 times a year. He takes a group across. And the reason Dave has one of his shoes off is apparently there's another coast-to-coast custom that at this particular creek, somebody's supposed to take their shoe off and get their foot wet, and it was cold that day, and none of the walkers were taking their shoes off. And we're like, no. And Dave goes, "Okay, I guess I'll do it." And he was such a good sport, and he was such a good guide. Dave and I did have running jokes because he learned quickly how directionally challenged I am. And so when it got to the flat parts and stuff where I was in the lead, his instructions to me would go something like this. When you get to the point where you have a choice, don't make it. That is so true. If there's a street, stop. So he recognized it quite early. And so on the last night of when we got finished, you get a little card that says, yes, you completed the Coast to Coast. And I got the Leadership Award. And the Leadership Award is a ball of twine. And Dave told me on my next long distance walk, I am to tie one end of the twine to myself, give the other end to the guide, and go no further than my twine will take me. So he was quite the good sport. And the other thing about Dave is what I learned, like on the third or fourth night, we were in a pub. I know y'all find that hard to believe, but we were in a pub. Those people drink all the time. I'm telling, especially the people, chill, honest to God. You start in the morning. We'll stop for a morning break and y'all are having a beer. And I couldn't believe it. But anyway, so we're in a pub and they had pub trivia. We had two teams from our Coast to Coast group. It was me and two of the guys from Asheville and Dave. So we had a group and there was another group. We won pub trivia, y'all. And I found out that Dave is about the only person more competitive than I am in trivia. And I had them sign our pub trivia answer sheet so I could save it forever just to prove it. Now, here's some of the things I'm going to remember about these people. This is one of the doctors from Asheville. Well, I didn't tell you, the guys, the men, all the folks from Asheville, they're all doctors. So Dr. Brian here, his idea of rain gear was seriously a dollar store poncho with a rope that he tied around him. So that was his idea of that. My hike husband, Mike Jones, there in the bottom, is a geologist. So almost every day, Mike would pontificate and educate us on the geology of the region. Then those two ladies, they were like gazelles. Those are the two ladies from England, and they were always out front when we were hiking up hills. And then in the middle, there were two ladies that were kind and just the sweetest ladies. So there wasn't a bad apple in the bunch. I was very, very blessed. I ended up, my roommate, I didn't show you her, that was her, the blonde lady. She was from South Africa, actually. And she and I were the two oldest on the trip. She was 67 and I was 65. No, she was 70-something. But here, like I said, we were together all the time. I really kind of thought that we would be at our own pace and we'd stop when we wanted to have lunch. But we did things together, and it was a good thing because otherwise somebody would have gotten lost. Not naming names, but somebody. Hey, we did have two that got lost one time, and I was so happy I wasn't among them. Now, I don't know, you can't hear this, I think. Oh. No, you. This is us, that's me and my hike husband. This is the next to the last day, and we were just being silly. We had music, and we played music, and then here we are, and you won't be able to hear us, but we are singing Me and Mrs. Jones. We got a thing going on. This was literally the last day. We were so punch drunk, we were so ready to be finished. So here we are on our last day, and this is called Fat Betty. And the tradition at Fat Betty is you leave a treat and you can take a treat. So I left some treats. I left there and brought it all the way from here. It was a piece of cheerwine cake. And so I left it there, and I wonder what the people who took that cheerwine cake thought about it. And here we go with some more of our fauna. They were not shy, they were everywhere. Just more sights along the way. And in Gromont, that was the town we stayed last. This is just a screen grab from a video. They had an actual steam locomotive there, and it was fascinating. Apparently people come from all over the place to see that locomotive. Now this is the night before our last day. Yeah, and you think this, because literally when we started our last day, it was straight up out of Gromont for a long, long way. But we're almost there. And I just thought that this was such a perfect, perfect sign. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. Because throughout this walk, I think before I had the walk, I've had some, I don't say crisis in in spirituality, but you know, we've been through some rough times. Mike and I both lost our sisters in the past couple of years, and my mom passed away in 2017. And of course, everybody's experienced loss, but it's just been questioning a little bit. And this trip, I don't think you could take this trip. I don't think you could take this walk without being restored and having your cup refilled. So I was grateful for that. And here we are, the very last day. We're going through woods, and this is of no particular historic significance. It's just something that was built into the side of the mountain. And on top, they built in chairs. They're wishing chairs. You're supposed to sit in one chair and make a wish, and then if you go to the other side and sit in it, it'll come true. I'm not rich yet, so it hadn't happened. So here we are. We're getting close, and as you can tell, this looks like you're getting the grass looks like you're getting closer to the. There it is. That's the North Sea in the background. And we're like, we're almost there. So here we are. This is where we started. So we're going to be coming around here, right through there. And then this is looking back that way. So you see our path coming this way. And you know what? If y'all watch the BBC, y'all see this all the time too. I always see this and I think it's so fascinating because it's so different from our coast. It's not, when I think of the beach and I think of the coastline, that's not what I think of. It's just amazing. So here I am, we're so close. And this little village right here is Robin Hood's Bay. See it there. And there we are at the end. Now there's another tradition. I got to dip my toes in the North Sea. And we've got to throw our kettles. So we throw our kettles. And the thing I love about this picture, I just love her. The joy that is on her face as she is doing it, it's like, we did it. We made it. And so here we are. There's the same sign that was at the beginning as at the end. And then I am actually holding a Wainwright beer in front of the sign. I did take a sip, even though I don't drink anymore. I did take a sip just to celebrate. And this is the sun setting on Robin Hood's Bay. And I'm going to just read this to you real quickly. Oh, how can I put into words the joys of a walk over country such as this? The scenes that delight the eyes, the blessed peace of mind, the sheer exuberance which fills your soul as you tread the firm turf. This is something to be lived, not read about. Your thoughts are simple, in tune with your surroundings. The complicated problems you brought with you from the town are smoothed away. Up here, you are near to your Creator. You are conscious of the infinite. You gain new perspective. Thoughts run in new, strange channels. There are stirrings in your soul which are quite beyond the power of my pen to describe. Something happens to you in the silent places which never could in the towns, and it is a good thing to sit a while in a quiet spot and meditate. The hills have a power to soothe and heal, which is their very own. No man ever came down from the hills without feeling in some way refreshed and the better for his experience. And that is Mr. Wainwright. So what's next? I'm not sure. But I think I'm going to do the Tour de Mont Blanc next summer. So I'm not going to climb Mont Blanc. I may walk around it. So we'll see. Depends on how much money and time I have. And thank you very much for your time. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy